Hello, friend. Welcome to Intimacy After Infidelity. I'm Christina Joy, Christian affair recovery coach, and the woman who built this podcast because I needed it and it didn't exist yet. So today I'm bringing you a conversation with someone I genuinely love, Beatriz Vargas, host of the Grace Fueled Wife podcast. Bea is a certified marriage coach, a marriage and family therapist, and a woman who has walked through her own season of a painful, disconnected marriage. And she watched God redeem it into something she could not have imagined. So we talk about what it looks like to have a voice in your marriage after you've been the one who caused the harm. We talk about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation and why those two are very different things. And we talk about what communication actually looks like when trust has been broken and you're trying to rebuild. I know this conversation is going to land real for you. But before we get into it, I also want to mention the Encounter Retreat that's coming in September, Panama City Beach, Florida, 10 women in a beautiful, relaxing beach house. It's an all-inclusive weekend where your whole being gets to heal and rest. Your body, your spirit, your heart. You're surrounded by women who understand exactly what you've been walking through. So, friend, if you are curious, if your heart just skipped a beat a little bit, email me the word retreat, Christina@ChristinaJoyCoaching.com. I read every email personally and I respond personally. And let's just talk about whether September is your moment. All right, stay tuned for this conversation with Bea. Do you ever find yourself Googling, how do I stop thinking about him? Or have you ever started your day determined to keep no contact, only to feel pulled right back into the same patterns and shame? Welcome to Intimacy After Infidelity. You're not crazy for feeling this way. I'm Christina Joy, and I've been exactly where you are. I know what it feels like to be overwhelmed by shame and wonder if dignity and peace are actually possible for you. I tried to fix myself by trying harder and committing to more self-control, but what I actually needed was healing from Jesus, who met me in the middle of it all. And that's what this podcast is here to help you do too. In this space, we heal the soul, heart, mind, and body, and we talk about the real things like longing, grief, shame, and confusion. So take a deep breath, friend. You are safe here. Hello, friends, and welcome back. I'm so excited for today. This is going to be a rich conversation. I have a dear friend, Bea, here with me today. And goodness, we sort of go back several years. We met when we were both working on podcasting, and I was first getting my podcast going. But I remember that she stuck out to me from the group that I was in because of her work in relationships. And so while I was learning about infidelity and affairs and how to coach women through that, I was excited to have someone alongside me that was further ahead in coaching wives, coaching women. And at the time, she was also working on becoming an official therapist. And so I'm excited to have Bea have this conversation with me today as a coach, as a therapist, and someone who has a heart for marriages and for women. And I'm excited because she has her own marriage story as well. And so I think this will just be a great conversation. So welcome, Bea.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, we did meet in the podcasting space, and my show is called The Grace Fueled Wife. And I do coach women specifically, which I think that's part of why we connected, because a lot of resources out there for marriages are for either the couple, or like you were saying before we hit record, there could be resources geared towards men, but not so many that are speaking specifically to women in marriages. And I know for my own marriage story, as you mentioned, and I can get into that in a bit, but for my own story, I didn't there were no resources for me. I had a few books. They were all written by men. And that's about it. No coach, no podcast, therapist, like nothing. And so I created the resource that I knew I needed. And then after doing that, after having coached wives, so podcast has been around for a few years now. And after having coached wives, I realized, oh, their stories are heavy. I should get some training. So I became a marriage and family therapist. And now I've been outside of coaching, I've also been a therapist, a couples therapist. So I specialize in couples and I do 90% of my caseload is with couples and I do some individual work. And it's funny because the individuals I work with, maybe I just attract them, I don't know. But the individuals I work with, a lot of the work that we do is about their relationship. And how their relationship is affecting them personally. So it's a little bit about me and my background. And thank you so much for having me on the show. You're right. We spent a lot of time before we recorded just kind of chatting. And so that's why I know this is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if we could even start with that, start with your own story, your own
Sure.
marriage. Because I remember reading that you described it as loveless and full of contempt, but God redeemed it back into a best friendship. And so a
Yeah.
lot of my listeners and the women that I work with talk about how it sometimes the marriage feels hopeless. And
Yeah.
especially after a woman who has had an affair, whether physical or emotional, it feels like, how in the world could I possibly rebuild this thing to be better than it was before? So I'm
Yeah.
curious, what did that look like for you, and what was the first shift that helped you get back?
Yeah, it's a lot. I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes story. It was probably years of feeling, I would say, disconnected. So, also understanding that I have my own personal story, like my past and how I grew up. Now that I'm a marriage therapist, I know, ooh, everybody's family, it plays into how they react in marriages and in relationships as adults. And I didn't realize how much that was playing into how I was behaving in my own marriage. And so I would say, um, for me, I was really reactive, right? He's at times would say, I feel like I can't say anything to you because every time he would say something, I felt it as criticism. And so I would be reactive and we would have these like big arguments, big fights, things like that. Almost didn't get married. We were engaged and had this massive fight. I took off my engagement ring and I was like, this was BC before I was saved. So but yeah, it was not pretty. And then found out, oh, we're pregnant. Okay, well, I guess we're all right. I guess baby's coming and we're just gonna get married. And so it didn't feel at the time like the most romantic of stories. And it the problems didn't go away because we had a baby. If anything, the problems were magnified. And so for the first 5 years of our marriage, it was very rocky, um lots of arguing, but then when there wasn't arguing, it was disconnection. It felt like roommates. It felt like lonely. I just felt lonely and he felt lonely. And so I tell this story. I was really reactive. I was this, I was that. And I was on another podcast and the host said, so was it you, or was it more 50-50? And I kind of laughed at that because I thought, "Woof, the thought that it was me, just me is pretty funny. I think because looking back at it, I can fully see my um, contribution, right, to the downfall of our relationship and how it was deteriorating and how my kind of my behavior was contributing. But he had a lot of contributing behaviors too. So it was pretty bad, pretty rocky. We had by the end, we had I mean it was just so empty. Like that's how the only way I could describe it. It was like empty, loveless. It did not feel like a relationship at all. I felt single. I felt like I'm better off being single. I felt like I definitely had thought about, oh, I'm gonna just ask for a transfer at work and and just leave and or get separated, move across the country and start a new life, find myself a new man, right? Like I was just I had all these all these ideas. And then he walked out on me. So it got so bad that we separated. I knew he was leaving. So I came home from a business trip one day to an empty apartment, couch gone, really, it was like he left. And even though I knew it was happening, it was pretty heartbroken. And at the time, or before, when things were bad, like I said, I was pretty reactive, and I'm kind of spicy. Like, I have a little bit of a mouth on me. So I'd be like, I don't need you. Da 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 da. Like, I make my own money. I have this, I have that, blah, 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 blah. So I told him so much, right? And it's like, that's contributes because how he felt emasculated, right? He felt
Yeah.
a lot of things. And so when he left, oh, you don't need me? Okay, cool. You handle this on your own. I'm gonna go find my own place. I'll send you money for our daughter. And that was it. Like, we'll go our separate ways. And at that moment, it was really humbling for me because I realized how much I did need him. Like, my heart needed him, and that was really tough. And I remember going to church, right? Like I said, I had no resources. I went to church, and my church leadership says, well, and I forget the verse, somewhere in Corinthians, it says, he was an unbeliever and I was new to the faith at the time. He said, well, if an unbelieving spouse abandons you, then the Bible says that you're okay.
Mm.
Basically, like, you're good. You're kind of blameless. Let him go. Um, and I appreciated that because they were trying to make me feel better, but it didn't match my own discernment. Like, it did not match what I felt God was calling me to. And at the time, I felt like God was calling me to fight for my marriage. And it seemed silly because everybody was like, why? Like, you had a terrible marriage. He walked out on you.
Mm.
Like, take it, take the freedom. And it didn't feel like freedom. And so I fought for my marriage, but again, without any resources, I didn't know how. So it was like, all right, it's me and my Bible. And sitting there, sat with God, went through a long, it was about 9 months of just a personal transformation and finding a lot of my own healing um, before God started working on him. And so as I started to change my behavior, I saw my husband's behavior change. And then God was speaking to me the whole time. Like, literally, it was, I'm going to bring you the same man, but a new man. You'll be back together by September. Like, very specific words that God was giving me. And I was like, okay. So I would tell my mom, God says we're going to be back together by like September. Mom was like, oh, honey, oh, you poor thing. Like, she almost didn't believe me. And I'm like, God said this to me. I'm just letting you know. You don't have to
Mm.
believe me. I know what he said. And sure enough, we were back together by September. And but it still wasn't good.
Mm.
It wasn't good. And the fighting was even worse than before because I had so much resentment and pain at that point built up. And I was like, why, God? Like, why would you save my marriage for it to just be this? I was better off alone then. I was like happier separated because at least I had every other weekend to myself. So that helped because I surrendered all of that pain, that hurt. I surrendered that to God. And in that moment, I felt a weight being lifted from my shoulders. It was pretty crazy. After that, my marriage was never the same. That was the first, um, when you asked about like the first shift, for me, the shift was that, like, the first shift really was not feeling released from my marriage, like feeling, going to God and being like, okay, this is what my pastor says. I know it says it right here in your word. What do I do? Right. And feeling that God was doing something in it and that I should stay in it. So that was the first shift because I was like, okay, okay, show me what I need to do. So that was shift number one. Shift number two wasn't with me, but it was my husband. My husband was an unbeliever. And he says it was part of, he became a believer later and they recorded our testimony for church, which is how I started the podcast and all this. He says, God said to him, you better go get your family back. And he was like, babe, I know it wasn't my voice. it had to have been God. I don't what else could it have been? But that was like for him the thing that was like, what am I doing? Right? I have a wife and a daughter and a family that we started, that we committed to, and what am I doing? So that was shift number 2. He came back, asked for forgiveness, I guess, for leaving me. And I was like, I already knew I was going to take him back, but obviously I gave him a hard time about it. And then I would say, then the third one was that that moment of surrender, because our marriage would have never have lasted if I kept holding it over his head of like, you left me, you abandoned me, you know, it was like that kind of blaming it all on him. So that surrender allowed me to take then responsibility for my own contributions to it. And then it was like great, right? For a long time, you know, we were really able to rebuild and become friends again. And it got to the point where it's like, oh, it's like I get butterflies when I see him again. And now that I'm a marriage therapist, I see that there was even more work, and this is 15 years almost, or a little less than 15 years, a long time since that reconciliation. And I've seen the growth and the change in our marriage since then. But that was like the beginning of it. And I thought it was the end. Like, I thought that moment of surrender was the end of our work. Beautiful marriage. Here we go. Yes, now I can coach women. It was not. It was just the beginning. And so now here we are, still a work in progress, still not perfect, but yeah, a completely, like, literally living the life of my dreams today. uh Never thought it would have been possible back then. So
Mm,
yeah,
yeah.
that was kind of long, but the sort of the
Yeah.
Cliff Notes version.
Yeah. No, I love even what you just said, that your surrender you thought was the end of like, okay, I surrender. I'm done.
Mhm,
Now it's going to be good. And I can relate to that because I know women that I work with, myself included, we have different feelings around, yeah, ending the affair, like cutting off contact with this guy, making those sorts of decisions of it. Does there need to be a job change? Does there need to be a city move? Does there need to be, whatever done on the phone, and accountability with the husband, all that. And then there's that, um, the decision of whether or not we're going to confess to our husband of, what we've
mhm.
done. And in some ways, yeah, that feels like, whew, okay, like I made all of these decisions, I've arrived. And then we don't realize all of the journey that's ahead of us too. And it's beautiful. I have a mentor who would say, it's brutal. It's very
Mhm.
brutal, and it's also beautiful at the same time.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I love that. Just seeing you can look back now and see all of the little lessons, the little experiences that you've had to walk through because
yeah,
of that surrender. That was really just day
yeah,
one. I love
yeah.
that.
So now the women I like, like what's my podcast for, right? Like the women I coach and I speak to is the woman that I was sitting in that marriage that felt loveless. It felt like roommates. It felt like I'm trying to get him to communicate with me. I'm trying to get him to change this or that. Um, and it's not happening. And it's frustrating me. So I'm going to tell him again. And I might tell him louder. Maybe if I tell him in Spanish, or if I do this or I do that, he'll listen.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out for me very well. So that's the women I kind of speak to. So probably, I would say for your listener, it's probably the woman that she was before, right? Before everything happened, is I believe that she probably was, right? Just wanting something. We were saying before we hit record, as a therapist now, I know that affairs don't happen in a vacuum.
Mhm.
They don't, you know, there's not like, oops, night and day. It doesn't happen. You know, there's usually years, months, whatever, of feeling missing something. And that, while that doesn't necessarily excuse the behavior, it does lend itself to, well, wait a minute, right? There was always something kind of broken in the marriage, or in the relationship. And sure, you know, an affair didn't fix it, but it wasn't the only thing that broke it, right? I think that's a really important piece to remember, because I would imagine um, that someone sitting with that might be sitting with feelings of guilt and feelings of, ugh, right? Just a lot of maybe even shame, wondering or questioning, and I could imagine that that's where she might be, not ever having met her, just kind of knowing, working with people, that's probably where she is, and then understanding that it's there's hope, right? And so what, wanting to get into a little bit of that conversation. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was eye-opening for me because, like you say, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so the day I kind of woke up, we talk about the affair fog. And so I woke up and I said, whoa, how did I get here? It wasn't accidental. Of course, I made intentional choices all
Yep.
along, to have the affair and then to stay in the affair. But when I realized, oh, the mess that I'm in isn't 100% my fault. Now I can take 100% responsibility. I made the choices myself, but maybe, just maybe there's a possibility there were some other influences that made
Sure.
it easier for me to walk into this. It did start to relieve some of that shame. Of course, I still
Yeah.
had shame of what I had done. Again, how did I end up here? But it relieved it a little bit to say, "Oh, I'm not necessarily a terrible person. I am not the
Right.
scum of the earth." I'm not
Right.
this awful person who just loves sin and hates God. In fact, it was the
Mhm.
opposite. I was wrestling with my faith and saying, "God, I want to love you. I want to be faithful to you, and I just feel caught in this sin." And so, yeah, to know that there were potentially some influences,
Yeah.
around me that weren't helping,
Sure.
that really was an encouragement when I realized that. And so another reason I wanted to have this chat with you today is
Yep.
because I know, like you even just mentioned hope, and I know that you talk a lot about communication, and especially
Mhm.
being a couples therapist, I'm sure a lot
Mhm.
of your conversations are about communication, between
Yep.
the spouses. And so, yeah, when you talk about hope and when you think about communication, I'm curious, what hope could you offer women who feel like, man, I don't even know what I want, and if I do know what I want, what I desire, I don't have a voice in this anymore. Like, who am
Mhm.
I to ask for what I want when in this situation my husband is hurting, and I know that I hurt him. So what right do I have to ask for something that I want? So
Uh,
how would you
yeah.
guide us through that?
I think that's such a beautiful question because it's so tender, right? Um, the idea, who am I to want or have needs when he's hurting, is it, like, it almost breaks my heart to hear, because I know how true it is, right? Because you're right, he is hurting, right? Um, but to say, who am I to have needs, is to deny your humanity. God doesn't look at you that way, right? He doesn't say that you don't deserve your needs to be met because you sinned. He never says that, right? Everybody deserves their needs to be met. Everybody deserves to feel loved and emotionally safe and um, connected, because let's face it, with communication, we don't communicate. 99.99% of the couples I see, we have problems with communication. And like the one couple that were like, oh no, we communicate great. No, they did not communicate great, right? Um, and what is it? It's that when you are having air quotes, so your listeners can't see me, but I'm using the air quotes. When you're having trouble communicating, it's because you're saying one thing and he's making a different meaning from it, and vice versa. He says something else, he says apple, you hear orange. That's not what I said. Well, that's what it meant for me. Right. So that's the story that I made up. And that story that I made up is tied to either past instances with you, or it's tied to growing up as a child, or it's basically tied into the pain cycle that you live and your husband lives individually. And that's where we make up these stories. So you are allowed and worthy, so worthy of being loved and having your needs met. Full stop, right? Full stop. Because Jesus, he loved everybody. He loved sinners. He loved everybody, and he said that's the greatest commandment, right? Like love God, love your neighbor. Full stop, right? Love your enemy. Full stop. So I would say first part is you are worthy of it. And then here's the harder part, the trickier part. Okay, even if you could get yourself to believe that I'm worthy of having needs, it's the, well, how then do I express those needs while still holding my husband's needs, being mindful of his and his hurt and, whatever. And I would say that, so there's a little, it depends on the stage where you're at, right? In terms of discovery, not just go like all of that, the stage that you're at. There's a point where um doesn't mean you are not allowed to have needs, but we have to shelve them for a little bit because we have to, and I just say we as as the other party, right? You have to fully understand, because your partner's pain needs to be witnessed. So fully understand the impact of the sin, the impact of your actions on your partner. And they need to know that you fully understand the impact. Until they know that you fully understand the impact, healing isn't going to be able to happen, right? Because they're like, you don't get it, right? And so that's why in the beginning, I gave my husband a hard time about bringing him back because, sure, him leaving wasn't necessarily an affair, but I was abandoned. I was hurt. There's pretty much all the same emotions that one might feel. I was feeling, when we got back together and I'm cleaning up and I see two concert ticket stubs because back in those days they had them to his favorite band that I didn't go to. I'm like, dude, did you have to keep them? Like, you could have thrown them away, right? It was still really hurtful. I don't know what he was doing while we were separated, but I can only imagine. And so all that hurt still felt there. And it wasn't until I felt that he really realized what is it that he put me through when he left, that I was able to start letting go, right? Like start trying to hold it over him. Because that's what a lot of it is. Like they're like, but you don't understand, or and they keep coming back to the hurt, reminding you of the hurt as if you needed to be reminded of the hurt, but it's because they don't yet feel that you get it. So I would say that's that's part one in terms of being able to have your needs met. Part two is there is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is, I will no longer hold this over your head, right? Reconciliation is the rebuilding of the trust. So you can forgive. Right? So that for me, when I took my husband back, I forgave him. I took him back. I moved into his new apartment. Um, but we were not reconciled at first. All that fighting. I didn't trust him. It was just that all that stuff that I had to let go of. And so that was its own separate work. The forgiveness was part one. The reconciliation was part two. And it's not until that piece, right, that I guess the couple is starting to reconcile, that then, okay, he knows, the impact, right? I get it. Like I understand the impact. He knows that I understand the impact. He's forgiven me. Now we're working on reconciliation and working on rebuilding that trust. And enough of it has been almost like enough trust has been deposited almost like in the bank account, right? Whatever that needs to be, that I can start saying, okay, I've been doing my part. I still have needs. And then it's how do you, because what happens is if you are just go back to your old habits, because maybe, at least for me, right? I can't speak to whoever the listener is. I don't know how she's communicating her needs to her husband. I know how I used to communicate my needs to my husband, and it was not the best way. It was very critical and demanding, or, I thought I'm just letting you know you need to da 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 da. You should da 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 da. You. Can sound very, and it's true. It might have been true. Can sound very critical to a person, just like he would say to me. And so then I started to learn the beauty of an I statement. I feel when this happens, I feel, right? Um, and we started to use that together. So when we are arguing and you shut down and walk away and give me the silent treatment, 'cause that's what he would do, I feel like you don't care. I feel like you, honestly, I feel unsafe because when I was a kid, my mom used to beat me, like literally, right? And like she would give me the silent treatment. So it's a real trigger for me. And and even though I know you would never lay a hand on me, it feels really scary to me when you do that. When I was able to communicate that to him in that way versus we're arguing, he shuts down, he walks away, he leaves the room. Now I'm like the crazy person because I'm following him. We're not done yet. And then because I there was so much anxiety in him walking away, um, he was able to stop and say, "Oh, wait a minute. No, babe, I'm sorry. That's not why I'm walking away. I'm walking away because I'm afraid to say something mean. I'm afraid to, hurt you with my words, and I need to regulate myself. I need to calm down." And I was like, "Oh, okay. So can we make an agreement, right? Can we make an agreement that if you walk away, you promise you're going to come back, or we're going to talk about it, and I'm not going to have to wait 2 weeks to have a repair conversation." And that's how the things started to change. And it's funny that you say, like, who am I to have a voice, right? In my particular story, my husband could have said the same thing. Who am I to have a voice? Because he was the one who, I'll like for all, like, for purposes of this conversation, sinned. He's the one who walked out. He's the one who, like, I was like, I'm still here. I'm still fighting for my marriage. If I had not been doing that, we probably would have gotten divorced, right? So he could have said the same thing. And I think the other part is, God had to work on me to help me see him through God's eyes, right? So that I was able to see my husband for the man who was so broken and hurt that he would make a choice like that to leave his family. Um, and so instead of just seeing, oh, this is the jerk who left me, like the world said, oh, he's crazy. Why would he leave you? Blah, 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 like why? And I started to see him for why he was hurt. And so I started to realize he did that because that was the only way he knew how to protect himself. The only way he knew how to find safety for himself, not, emotional safety, is to step away. And was it the best decision for us in our particular story? I think it was the best decision because I know that God allows these things to happen, and I don't know if God would have been able to do that kind of work that He did in my heart with my husband still living at home. But so I'm like, okay, God, thank you. I'll take whatever. It was very painful, like you said, very beautiful. Um, but that was one of the things that once I started to see that, then I also started to um, change how I approached him and then helped him to feel like he was worth having a voice.
Mm,
But I needed God to do that. And so for your listener, um, that's where then the prayer is. God, can you help him to see me the way you see me? Right? Instead of just seeing me for my sin, can you help him to see me in my brokenness and what my needs are? Um, I would say 'cause that was a big thing in my own transformation is how were my prayers changed? And they used to be, God, can you change him?
yeah.
And instead it was, God, can you change my heart for him? Or can you change his heart for me? That sort of thing. So that there was a we're talking about shifts, right? That was
Yeah.
definitely another shift in there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope that answered your question.
Yes. No, that answered that plus a couple of questions. Yeah, because I
Okay.
was thinking what were some of the practical things that the listener could walk away with it, and you answered that of, watching some of those I statements, versus everything being, pointed at him and, yeah, and then shifting the prayers. I love that. Some very, very practical tips in there. And I
Yeah,
I know that we could continue to talk for another couple hours on this.
sure.
So I just also want to point the listener to your direction and say,
Sure.
where can they easily connect with you? What's the name of your
Sure.
podcast they can listen to? How can they
Yeah.
follow
So my podcast is The Grace Fueled Wife. And that's where they'll find me every week. And I talk about um, basically, like I had mentioned before, I'm talking to the woman who is trying to repair her marriage on my podcast, and to some degree, the one who's looking to discern. I don't coach the woman looking to discern should I stay in or out on this marriage, but I helping them to understand at least a little bit what's a boundary, what's abuse like.
you?
So I definitely have several episodes on that, like understanding, because I don't believe that we're called to stay in abusive relationships. And so that, that whole realm of women. And I think a woman who is separated or going through separation. So I've coached women who are separated but are still looking to repair, because that was my story. So I definitely have some of those listeners and clients as well.
Mm,
So I try to look at it through all the lenses, but I try to make every episode pretty tactical and teaching, and just kind of, yes, we need to, like, we look to the Lord first. We look to like our prayers and all that. But and at the same time, not but at the same time, these are some practical things, like practical resources that
mm,
I have now that I didn't have when I was in that place. And so that's what I try to provide, because I don't think anybody is, besides
mm.
people like you and I, like who is speaking to
Yeah.
women specifically, Christian women specifically, right? Because the culture, church, we get a lot of really, really negative messages that are harmful and that either keep us in bad marriages, or the idea can sometimes become it's only our job to change, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think the other issue is, especially when it comes to infidelity or affairs, men, they seem to get a pass.
Mm. I have an episode about that.
Right? They
Yeah.
seem to get a pass, but us? Oh, never. And so it's the double standard, right? And so that's why I wanted to like open that up from that lens of like things don't only happen in a vacuum,
Yeah.
right? Everybody deserves love and care and respect, and emotional safety is because I'm a therapist. Emotional safety is like one of the biggest things that I talk about, and I try to help my listeners discern,
Mhm.
is this emotionally safe? Because all of my couples who come into couples therapy, they're coming in because they don't feel emotionally safe with their partner. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in therapy. Okay. And so then I help them try to rebuild that. And I think for the woman who's doing it on her own, that's kind of like my thing. Like the woman who's trying to fix her marriage on her own, like that's who I speak to. Um, that's really hard to build. And so
Mm,
how do you build that? So it's with some of the things I said. It's like how we're communicating, how our prayers are, and then also having um, just those boundaries. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
yeah. Yeah, no, that was so good, so good. So I'll link the podcast and the website in the show notes here so they can connect with you. But so rich, yeah, so appreciate your tips and your heart for women and for wives and for marriages. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Awesome. Thank you.